What do you do if the buyer of your business wants to use your license? Now, most small businesses operate in industries that require some type of license, whether that's plumbing, HVAC, electrical, general contracting. A lot of small businesses need to have someone who serves as the qualifying person for the license for that business. And in most cases, it's the business owner who serves as that person. So when you go to sell your business, you're going to be approached by buyers who don't qualify to hold that license. And what many of them say they're going to try to do is maybe buy the business and then operate under your license after the sale. Now, that strategy is only going to work if you maintain some equity ownership in the business, say 5 to 10%, or the buyer comes in with all cash, because otherwise the bank is not going to do their loan to buy your business. So if they're buying 100% of your business, they're going to find out, most of the buyers probably don't know this yet, but they're going to find out when they go to do their loan that the bank's not going to do the deal because you, the seller, would not be allowed to serve as the qualifying person after selling 100% of the business. So if that's the plan, you need to do a partial sale. Really, these just became workable in December of 2024. There were some guidelines that passed that really make partial sales much more attractive. So this is pretty new, but that is a strategy that you could use if you wanted someone to be able to use your license. Now, then the question comes down to, do you want someone to continue to use your license? And that's really going to come down to a personal decision. Your reputation is going to be on the line. It might not matter to you because you're retired, but still, what I've learned is that most people don't like to see their name at risk. Another option is to have an employee to serve as the qualifier. One trick here, though, is that most banks are going to, if it's going to be a permanent solution, that person needs to be an equity owner in the business. Again, at least 5, 10, probably even more owner in the business to make sure that they're going to stay with the business, because the bank's not going to do a loan and risk that person leaving pretty early on in the process, and then that loan can't be paid back because the business can't operate anymore. One thing that we have done is when it's more temporary, let's say you have a buyer who's going to qualify for that license in, say, 6 months or a year, then you maybe do a 1 to 2 year contract with an employee with some type of retention bonus. You can usually do that with the banks. We like to see buyers that plan to become the qualified person. So if there's some gap that we need to fill, we can do that. But the bank's usually going to want to see a contract with some incentive for the person who's holding that license to stay and continue to hold that license while the buyer is qualifying. Again, if your buyer is a cash buyer or a non-SBA buyer, they can do whatever they want. But there aren't many buyers like that. Now, the buyer could use, there are some third-party companies out there where individuals essentially rent out their licenses. There's websites and marketplaces you can do that. That could be an option for a buyer as well if they don't qualify for your license. I always think that one's a little weird. You have a completely unqualified buyer coming in, going to that marketplace to get the license. Ideally, you want to sell to someone who's going to qualify to run your business, which means qualifying for the license. We understand that's not always going to be the case. There's going to be some situations where you need some flexibility. But yeah, of course, the ideal is going to be to sell to someone who qualifies for the license. But if not, your options are either to keep some equity yourself, remain a partial owner, and then allow the business to use your license, to put an agreement in place with an employee, of either giving them equity or an employment contract with bonuses if it's going to be a shorter period of time. Or you could send your buyer to that third-party resource to see if they can rent someone's license. We've done deals with these lots of different ways. That's really why it's important to work with an advisor who has some experience in handling some of these issues and knowing how to be creative and do what's best for both sides. So if that's what you're looking for, reach out and we can help you sell your business anywhere in all 50 states.